Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to jump into something that, well, it might feel a bit heavy at first,
Mm.
maybe even a touch unsettling. But trust us, it's a really deep dive into how we're living our lives right now.
Yeah, definitely.
We're unpacking this really potent idea that you spend your entire life gathering guests for your funeral.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a statement to start with.
It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Almost poetic, kind of stark.
Mm-hmm.
But the source material we're looking at, it's an article called The Funeral We Live For, A Life Spent Pleasing Spectators.
It argues this isn't just, a metaphor.
Right. Not just flowery language.
No, it's arguing it's a very real, measurable societal trend,
Yeah.
especially now in our super connected digital world.
Absolutely. And the article suggests it has some pretty serious implications for, well, for all of us.
Yeah.
Exactly. And while that phrase, gathering guests, it's powerful, it definitely grabs you. The article really uses it to pinpoint a significant modern reality, I think.
It makes a really compelling case that maybe a surprising amount of our energy can get spent building this perceived life.
Like curating.
Yeah, exactly. Like curating for an audience instead of maybe authentically living just for ourselves.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Let's do it.
So the source kind of lays out this perspective. It suggests that almost from birth, right, we're guided by these societal standards.
The norms.
Yeah, the norms that often equate success with these external things. Titles, salaries.
How many followers you have.
Exactly. Followers, fame, getting that recognition.
Right. And the article points out that chasing these things, these external markers, often without us even fully realizing it, it sort of turns our lives into these subconscious performances.
Performances, how so?
Well, we're constantly seeking that validation from outside,
Yeah.
trying to get the world's nod of approval.
To feel like our life mattered in the public eye.
Precisely, that external stamp.
And the source gives some really pointed examples, kind of jumped out at me.
Like what?
It talks about the phenomenon of LinkedIn obituaries. Have you seen those?
Oh, yeah, where it's all about the career.
Right. Posts after someone passes, and they focus almost entirely on their job achievements, the accolades.
Mm-hmm.
It really highlights how we've kind of let professional titles and public recognition become these primary metrics for summing up a whole life.
It's quite stark when you put it that way. And you see it reflected in the funerals themselves, too, according to the article.
How so?
Well, it discusses how sometimes these really elaborate services, hundreds of guests, grand displays, they can sometimes feel less like an intimate farewell.
And more like,
More about the spectacle, maybe.
yeah.
About reinforcing the impression the person left,
Huh.
but on this wide public scale.
Yeah, that idea, the funeral as a final performance, that's pretty powerful stuff.
It is.
And the source, it really drives this home with some incredibly poignant real-world examples, highlighting lives that, despite having immense public admiration, really grappled with this tension.
Yeah, the contrast can be jarring.
It brings up Anthony Bourdain's story.
Oh, right. Complex figure.
Totally. From the outside, he had this life, right? Constant travel, amazing food, this global audience who just adored him.
The dream life for many.
Absolutely. But the article notes that behind that huge public image, the worldwide applause, he privately struggled.
Huh.
A lot.
With loneliness, depression.
Exactly. And despite, millions of admirers, his funeral was apparently quite small and private. And the source's point is pretty stark. He gathered admirers, yeah, sure, but perhaps not those deep, intimate connections, not people who really knew him.
Wow, that hits hard. And it makes you think about others, too, like Queen Elizabeth II.
Right, the source mentioned her, too.
Yeah, I mean, her funeral was this massive global event, wasn't it? Billions watching, thousands lining the streets.
From unbelievable scale.
Totally. Yet the article references these accounts from people closer to her, especially in later years, suggesting, periods of pretty deep isolation, despite being universally admired and respected.
Wow, so that contrast again.
Exactly. The source really wants you to see that contrast.
Yeah.
The huge public spectacle around her death versus the potential private reality of her later life.
And that gap, between public life and private reality, it just gets amplified massively when you bring in the modern age.
Oh, definitely. Social media?
Yeah, the source dives right into that. How funerals now have, specific hashtags.
Hashtags for funerals. Wow.
Right, and digital memorials popping up everywhere. And even that, increasingly common and frankly kind of weird phenomenon.
What's up?
People, sometimes even just distant acquaintances, posting selfies near the coffin.
Oh, yeah, that feels off.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the critical question the source then poses.
Which it,
Are these guests, online or offline, truly mourning a person?
Hmm.
Or are they maybe engaging with and sort of performing around an image?
That's a really sharp question. Performance grief.
Yeah. And there's a specific detail from the article that's pretty confronting, actually.
Okay.
It cites a 2021 Pew Research report. It found that over 62% of people actually admitted
What?
to curating their online posts about deaths, specifically to sound more thoughtful.
Well, over 60%.
Yeah. So this raises an important question the source wants us to ask ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the real motivation behind that public performance of grief online?
That statistic really does make you pause, doesn't it?
It really does. Makes you wonder about the intention behind so much of our online presentation, especially around these big emotional events.
Yeah.
So the source makes it pretty clear that this kind of living, focused mainly on gathering guests, seeking that external approval, managing perception, it comes at a cost, a significant one.
Right. And the article actually labels this cost emotional bankruptcy.
Emotional bankruptcy.
Yeah. It argues that in chasing that external validation, people often end up sacrificing their authenticity.
How so? Like, what kind of sacrifices?
Well, they might suppress their true dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pick the safe career they don't actually feel passionate about.
Right. Or maybe get into relationships, even marriages, that look good on the outside.
Exactly. But lack that genuine connection.
Yeah.
Or hiding mental health struggles, right?
Out of fear of appearing anything less than, quote unquote, successful or put together.
That pressure to maintain the facade.
Totally. And the article points to a really extreme manifestation of this in Japan. Kodokushi.
Oh, I've heard of that. Lonely death.
That's it. Lonely death. It's a phenomenon apparently so prevalent there that the government actually had to create departments just to deal with the logistics.
Logistics of.
Finding and managing the deaths of people who die alone and go unnoticed, sometimes for weeks.
Oh my gosh. That's heartbreaking.
It is. And the source highlights that many of these individuals, they lived in bustling cities, but they'd often prioritized work or duty or just keeping up appearances above cultivating real, meaningful personal relationships.
Wow. That's a really, really stark picture.
It is. And the source uses it to bring the point right back to you, the listener.
Reminding us that this kind of, silent emotional death, losing connection to yourself, to others, that can happen long before the physical one.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah. It's a strong prompt to maybe reflect on what we're prioritizing and what fears might be holding us back from building more authentic, connected lives.
Okay, so if the source is arguing against living primarily for external validation, for gathering guests, what does it suggest we should be focusing on instead? What should we be gathering?
Yeah, the article definitely shifts gears here. It starts listing alternatives.
Like?
So instead of chasing guests or those external metrics, it says we should be gathering moments of honesty.
Honesty.
Yeah, those times where we actually dare to be our truest selves, unfiltered.
Okay, what else?
Gathering connections built on vulnerability, where real trust and understanding can actually grow, not connections based on, performance or just shared surface level stuff.
Right, deeper connections.
Exactly. It also talks about gathering passions, pursuing things just for the intrinsic joy they bring you, regardless of whether anyone applauds or even notices.
Doing it for yourself.
And ultimately, gathering inner peace. Cultivating that sense of self-acceptance, contentment, which is really different from just piling up outward prestige.
Inner peace over outward prestige. I like that. Here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Go on.
The source's concluding thought in this section, it feels incredibly liberating.
Okay.
It acknowledges, look, the funeral is inevitable, right? For everyone. It's a final gathering.
True.
But the real goal, the article suggests, shouldn't be the size of that gathering. It should be living a life where, at the end, you can look back and know you were truly present.
Present for yourself.
Yeah. There for yourself throughout the whole journey, regardless of who shows up in those final moments or, what the public record says.
That reframes things quite a bit, doesn't it?
It really does. So if we try to kind of tie it all together, the source's overall message, it feels less like a judgment,
And more like
a profound caution, maybe. The idea of gathering guests for your funeral isn't really meant to condemn ambition or connection itself.
Right. It's not saying don't have friends or success.
Exactly. It's urging us to deeply evaluate why we're doing what we do.
Yeah.
Are we truly living our own life? Or are we just performing for an audience that maybe doesn't even truly see us?
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
And the source leaves us with that really powerful reminder, doesn't it?
Which one?
That the number of people at your funeral,
Yeah.
that should never, ever be the measure of a life well lived.
Yeah.
What truly matters is the depth, the quality of the genuine connections you nurtured along the way, and the peace you found within yourself.
Definitely. The article wraps up with some, I thought, really beautiful, simple suggestions for what a life well lived does look like, from its perspective anyway.
Oh yeah, like what?
Like living for the sound of laughter in quiet kitchens. Simple moments.
Nice.
For the midnight truths you exchange with someone you feel truly seen by.
Vulnerability again.
Exactly. For moments of just unfiltered, uncomplicated joy. And for that deep, quiet peace that comes from knowing you genuinely chose and walked your own path.
On your own terms.
On your own terms, yeah.
And it leaves you with this incredibly potent closing statement to chew on.
Which is?
That when the final curtain falls, the real tragedy wouldn't be a small funeral or not having enough public accolades. It would be having lived your entire life striving for an audience that was never truly there in the first place.
Yeah.
And maybe missing the chance to be truly present for yourself.
Wow. Okay. That lands heavily. So, reflecting on all of this from the source, what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Yeah.
What are you finding yourself gathering in your life? Is it mostly guests for a performance? Or is it moments of true connection and that inner peace we talked about?
A big question to sit with.
It is. Maybe just think about one small step, just one you could take today towards living just a little bit more authentically. Something to ponder.